Hundreds of thousands of people witness the results of his work every day. These are residential areas, squares, monuments, museums, ethno villages, and much, much more. We will tell you about the life and work of an amazing man and an outstanding architect, Almas Ordabayev. Watch the Pride program today and learn the history of Kazakh architecture and what it takes to succeed in a chosen career. Hello, you're watching Pride on Kazakh TV, and I'm Aliftina Madyarova. Today we're going to meet and get to know an outstanding architect, artist, historian, and archaeologist all in one. Please meet Almas Ordabayev. Almas Ordabayev was born on April 19, 1938 in Novosibirsk. He is a Soviet Kazakh architect, designer and historian of material culture. He is vice president of the Designers Union of Kazakhstan, a member of the Architects Union of Kazakhstan, and an honorary architect of Kazakhstan. Ordabayev is the holder of the Kurmet Order, as well as the medals for distinguished labor and 10 years of Astana. He is also the winner of the Astana Bayterek 2005 festival in the design category. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe called architecture numb music. The hero of our today's program has devoted his whole life to this art. He has done over 60 iconic architectural works, archaeological research, film projects, and dozens of works on architecture history, some of which are still in the making. What did you like to draw when you were a kid?
Everything, and about the war too. I was a military boy, into tanks, planes, but not that much. After all, we were Soviet children trapped in these patterns, and everything that we saw was all pre-organized. I had a very good friend. We've been friends since 6th or 7th grade. He lived right over the fence in a family of geologists. His father was a very talented man who happened to have a camera. It was actually the first camera that I've seen in my life. He was a geologist who just loved traveling so much. He has worked as a geologist in Western and then in Eastern Siberia and also in Mongolia since the 1920s. He was a born ethnographer, artist and photographer.
Who knows, maybe it was this childhood friendship and common interest that were the first impulse to the future choice of life and professional path.
In the final years, when they had moved to Almaty, he had been traveling across Kazakhstan and had taken his son with him during the summer holidays. Sergei Konstantinov. We were such good friends. Oh boy, we did so many things together. We wrote novels and stories. We even connected the telephone to each other using threads and spools. We creaked and knocked. We built models of the Aral Sea, Lake Balkhash and Issyk-Kul, and then built cities on them, on their shores. We collected coins, banknotes, anything we could think of, even records. Every time he came back from his father's expedition, he'd bring some rocks, some stories with him, some stuff. So, in short, we nourished each other. He's a very talented man. He's got a PhD in physics. He's actually one of the top nuclear physicists.
So he had an influence on you?
Yeah, we mutually educated each other. I introduced him to architecture, painting, and literature.
Back in the late 19th century, American artist Dan Rice said that architecture is art you can walk through. And as I'm listening to how Almas is talking about his passion for this profession, I realize that there is some truth to that. Besides, when it comes to buildings and streets that you and I can go through, not metaphorically, but in a literal sense, his words seem to come alive.
Several buildings were built in Almaty from 1952 to 1955, and I still like them, but in my own way. I've got warm feelings towards them. These are the government house, the KBTU building, and this long residential house, which is located on Stalin Avenue, now Ablaykhan Avenue. I really liked those details. Back in the day, those elements made me go there and stare at them. Several variations of cornices and capitals were made for the government house. I saw how they were installing them and deciding on how it looked. It was all very interesting.
The years we were talking about just now, the hero of our program did not yet realize that the day would come and the streets of his hometown, which he admired as a child and as a teenager, would become his place for work and creativity.
Well, I started going to the libraries quite early. I was an 8th or 9th grader when I borrowed those classic books by Alberti and Palladio. Those big albums. Our library had a good book selection. It was the place which gave me the chance to look closely at all these capitals, balusters and cornices, all these details. I still love the modern architecture and the avant-garde. I really love it all, especially when it's done well. But the architecture of those times is really something. It plays the long game and there's so much to discover.
My interlocutor has a sharp tongue. However, let's not forget that at the time it was not acceptable to express one's views so openly or to give vent to excessively bold creative impulses, to put it mildly. This applied to artistic people too, and not least. In general, was it hard at that time not to fit in with the general pattern? I mean, not to be so ideological, adjusted, or appropriate.
Yeah, I would say it was hard. After all, the vast majority of people lived in that flow. And the pressure of these Komsomol, Pioneer, and other organizations wasn't that much aggressive and terrible. But it was soft, you know, the Soviet, the Russian way.
But talent will find a way of realization against all odds. Like many creative people, artists, and even more so, architects of that time, young Ordabayev went to study in the northern capital of our then homeland, St. Petersburg, which at that time was called Leningrad. New environment, new acquaintances, new ideas, and the influence of everything at once. Just imagine how it must have affected the mind of a 17-year-old boy.
I moved there in 1955 when I was a 17-year-old boy, and I immediately got into the company of absolute intellectuals. I don't know how it happened, just luck, I guess. The underground circuit, as they call it now. So I read a lot with them, and we often visited museums like the Hermitage Museum and the State Russian Museum. And besides the curriculum itself, we were interested in a lot of other things. We had Jews, Tatars, Russians, and guys with European roots. It was an international company. Many of them were true intellectuals. And this, of course, made a great impression on me. I left Komsomol in 1957. Well, the girls also played an important role, because you know how they do it. It was 2 girls. One of them became a writer, a well-known publicist, and the other just treated me well. They took care of me and took me everywhere with them. In Soviet times, making home visits was very common. It was a usual practice. I remember how I got to see the real apartments of professors for the first time in my life.
Almas Ordabayev's parents were economists. Moreover, his father, Baimukhan Ordabayev, was also involved in journalism. Surely, the father's influence played a great role in the life of the young man. And could it be otherwise? Almas remembered his dad's wise words and advice for the rest of his life.
He worked for the Russian Famine Relief Commission, although he didn't tell his little son about it. He told me the details later. But he, so to speak, gently implied that we should save ourselves. The nation needs to have more educated people, Kazakh people. He said we shouldn't fight or argue with anyone, but preserve what we have.
And Almas strove to preserve. Having received his degree, the young architect returned to his homeland for work. And around us, we can now see the results of his work. Literally. Stay a moment. Take a closer look next time you pass by the scientist's house in Almaty or walk around the Samal Quarter. Impressive, isn't it? Although the journey from idea to its implementation has often been thorny and full of challenges.
At that time, there were always some setbacks, and not really that, it's just things were developing slowly, time-wise. And in general, it was very tedious. All buildings that were designed in the USSR with a cost of over 5 million rubles, not dollars but rubles, had to be approved in Moscow. For industrial projects, there was this state committee for construction, while for civil projects, there was the National Committee for Civil Engineering and Architecture. And so we would go there for approval. Whenever we had to go there to present our big projects, Dimash would call Leonid Ilyich and tell him, "My guys are coming to you. Please, don't keep them there long, and if you can, try to help them instead." Yes, I remember it well.
This is the Samal residential district as it was designed. Alas, the project was never fully implemented. The idea was truly grandiose, because Samal was conceived and developed as a living space of the future, with spacious residential areas, large green parks, and a luxurious sports complex. The architectural idea extended widely, from the new square, which is now called the Republic Square, to the foot of the mountains. But still, the part that Almas and his team managed to implement is certainly impressive.
And here's a mock-up of the new square. Alexander Ivanovich Karzhempo and I came up with the idea to make it just like that. And yet, there is no square now, it's a street, an extended one. And this is the western part that had to be made visually even lower. And this was the project that we loved very much. Here's Al-Farabi Avenue, this is the Esplanade and the new square. It was a sample. We prepared a lot of samples, but the main idea was that it had to be a large green zone. Also, the Olympic Center was to be built by the mountains.
Besides project activities, Almas Ordabayev has a rich teaching experience. He simultaneously worked in the architecture department of the Kazakh Polytechnic Institute and taught courses in cultural studies at the departments of philosophy of the Kazakh State University and Alma-Ata University. Later, he taught at the design department of the Zhurgenov Kazakh National Academy of Arts, where he supervised such subjects as the history of Kazakh art, history and theory of ornament, history and theory of design, and the basics of graphic design. In addition, Almas has another passion, which is archaeology. He believes that these two sciences cannot be studied separately, because archaeology is, in many ways, nothing more than the history of architecture.
But my main profession is architecture. It is very time-consuming, especially the architecture that I used to do and not what I'm working on now. I've tried to present it as a field of work evolving in time from antiquity to the present moment. Because the history of architecture, precisely our Kazakh, Central Asian, Turkestan history, was my favorite subject. That's why, to me, all my trips to Central Asia were both study experience and holidays, and well, life itself.
Together with his friend, architect Timur Suleimenov, Almas Ordabayev created a monument, which is a memorial complex to the heroes of Cherkassk defense located in the Almaty region. The three-pointed pyramids of the memorial represent the acuteness of the class struggle of 1918 to 1919. The site is now included in the list of monuments of national significance. Often in his life and work, Almas Ordabayev had to touch history, one might say, in a literal sense. For example, he participated in the restoration work of the Khoja Ahmed Yasawi mausoleum and the Ascension Cathedral. Had it not been for the experience and extensive knowledge of architecture, the country could literally have lost forever the essential elements of those monuments, which are of historical importance to us.
For me, those trips across Kazakhstan, especially to Mangyshlak, were first a shock, a discovery, and then a subject of a long-term study and imbuement. with that stone architecture. By the way, the only real stone architecture created by nomads. There is an architecture in Mangyshlak that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. This is the highest level of architecture created by nomads alone. Certainly they were influenced by many different things they saw during their trips around the world. But despite that, they created something totally unique, something of their own. And most phenomenally, they created their own modernist style at the beginning of the 20th century, while around this time, modernism first appeared in Europe.
Ordabayev was so fascinated by this topic that he initiated a large-scale research in this area, and later became the author of a series of lectures entitled Stone Architecture of Mangyshlak as a Unique Phenomenon of Nomadic Culture.
Firstly, this was facilitated by the wonderful, amazing building material that was under their feet. They could, just take it, cut it down, cut it out, do whatever they want. In addition, Western Kazakhstan and Mangystal are the part of the Kazakh steppe that is close to Europe. And also, these guys, the nomads, they traveled a lot.
Numerous trips and many years of studying these amazing places could not but result in a bunch of scientific work, or rather, works written by Almas. Nowadays, his experience, documented and put in order, helps to reconstruct the events of the past and feature in documentary films.
I have a very good relationship with Akhan. We have already made 6 films together. He actually appreciates my advice on a variety of issues, including the script and the details.
Almas Ordabayev helped bring films closer to historical accuracy. The tale of the Beautiful Aisulu, The Journey into History, Nomad, Myn Bala, The Road to Mother, and Tomiris are just a small part of them.
It is a historical film about Qasim Khan. The shooting has already been completed, now it is at the editing stage. They're doing video post-production on a computer. My role there was to draw cities, decorations, all that stuff.
For Almas, working in the film industry has long become an integral part of life, because historical films provide an opportunity to at least partially recreate what the life of our country was like many years ago.
We've been working together for many years, 10 years, if not more. I know all these cities very well. All these sites where the events of our film are taking place. For example, Sozak, Sauran, Turkestan, and so on. I've been there many times, looked at their remains, and read everything that's been written about them.
History is history, but let's be honest, Almas Ordabayev is not just living in the past. I mean, how is he supposed to nurture inspiration and broaden his horizons, if not by traveling? But in terms of world architecture, which cities inspire you the most? Which ones are the closer to your heart?
Oh, cities, there are so many of them, and they are all so different. Let's say London, Paris, Rome, Florence, and Venice are among those big cities I like to travel to just to enjoy them, and not search for the architectural examples for my future projects. I can add Istanbul to this list too. What I like about Istanbul is that being one of the great cities in the world with an amazingly long history, for me, it's not just a tourism attraction where one can learn about the history and development of architecture, art and so on, but a place that is very close to my heart.
Историю, развитие архитектуры, искусства и так далее. Город очень близкий мне.
Now, Almas Ordabayev may well be called an avid traveler. So it is even more difficult to believe that a while ago he was literally restricted to travel abroad. Dissent and excessive courage in statements at a difficult Soviet time could have negative consequences. it happened to Almas too. Some people say that it was because he studied foreign literature, especially American one, too carefully and thoroughly. According to another version, in the early 60s, he painted a portrait of Stalin and a portrait of Khrushchev on the reverse side. But Almas himself blames everything on his love for provocative jokes, which he could not resist at that time. What was the real reason for that? We'll probably never know. We can only be thankful for the fact that there are now almost no restrictions to travel.
When you come to big cities, it's not that you get lost in them, but you behave yourself like a tourist who came to this legendary city and wants to see with his own eyes everything that he read and watched about as a child. And also to understand what real architecture is and what the real urban settlement and the city actually look like. And Istanbul, unlike all the other big cities, is surprisingly yours. It's amazing. We are Turks, after all. And despite the fact that Istanbul is an eternal city, where so many different people have lived, it still gives you a feeling that it's yours. That atmosphere and those people who you meet on the streets and those simple conversations with them is the warmest and the most pleasant experience. A similar attitude can be seen in Italy, somewhere in Venice or Florence. But those kinds of things you'll never see anywhere in the world but Istanbul. Of course, Istanbul is a great city, but also very warm for me.
Interestingly, a few years ago, in Prague, we met with Almas Ordabayev's daughter, who is an equally distinguished person. Jamilya Stekhlikova, née Ordabayeva, is a famous European politician. On the one hand, she is the first Kazakh woman to become a minister in Europe, and on the other, she is the first minister of non-Czech origin in the Czech Republic. This is a truly unprecedented case. Here's a photo of my dad when he was studying in Leningrad. And this is a photo of when he came to Moscow to take her with him. She studied there. This is how young guys moved from Almaty to Moscow or Petrograd for study. Here is my father and his friends on the train from Almaty to Moscow. This photo was taken when my dad got his first camera, and had been taking pictures ever since. He's also such a devoted researcher of the history of his country, of his nation. And maybe it will also be interesting if I say something about my dad's parents too. His father is from southern Kazakhstan and his mother is from Ufa. She was a Bashkir woman. Here's my dad with his parents. Jamilya often writes for many international publications, speaks on radio and TV, learns new languages, and above all, doesn't leave her permanent occupation. Let me remind you that she's a practicing psychotherapist. Her father always speaks of her with great love and warmth. But of course, Almas Ordabayev's love for his grandchildren is so special. He is very proud of them. For example, his granddaughter Camilla works in the film industry.
Camilla studied photography and video art in Amsterdam. She's working now, they're making videos. She has several beautiful works. She actually works for one American company which is engaged in presenting Eastern European movies in international festivals and organizing their commercial release.
And while Camilla went on a creative path, his grandson Alan chose a very different field. The young man is studying law. He wants to dedicate himself to the protection of human rights. This is clearly the mother's genes. The family resemblance of our heroes is striking immediately. I mean, the way they look and, of course, their energy and temperament. The architect's daughter had a strong temper and independent personality from an early age.
This is the very arch that Jamilya recalls all the time. She, along with their niece Rashida and her best friend Adila, liked to goof around and run off to this arch and then to the park.
In fact, it is impossible to forget the coziness and this amazing atmosphere of Almaty courtyards, especially the old town. Just like Jamilya, having lived for decades in Prague, she still remembers these warm feelings. Of course, the city is very beautiful. It's impossible to get used to it, but still, my hometown is Almaty. I feel like a guest here all the time, and Almaty feels like home. Although there are a lot of new buildings in the city and I keep asking the names of new streets, as I still cannot memorize them, I don't feel like a guest there. Every time I come back to Almaty, I feel like my city is gone, that it has disappeared. But then again, when I walk down these beloved old streets, we also decided to walk along these streets. What house did you live in?
In that house, we lived in the northernmost part.
Turns out you and Rashid Nugmanov were neighbors.
Yes, we lived in the same section with the Nugmanovs, right across from each other.
That's great. In this neighborhood, on almost every house you can find plaques with the names of famous Kazakhs who lived here before.
And Zhenya Sidorkin with his wife Gula lived in this block. What an incomparable beauty she was, Gula Ismailova. We were proud of our neighbors. Tanishbayev, the first Kazakh cameraman, lived in this section. He is the son of that famous scientist who became a railroad man during the Tsarist period and worked on the project of the Turkestan-Siberian Railway even before the revolution.
It's just impossible to imagine how many amazing stories, family secrets and dramas these walls keep. And the children of those artists and scientists who once moved into newly built houses in the Golden Square of Old Almaty still live in some of these apartments.
There were a lot of famous people here, including theatre workers. On the other side, you can find a memorial plaque for Kauken Kinzhitayev. He and Shakyan Aymanov were siblings. He was both an actor and a bit of a singer. And his wife, Shabal Beysekova, was an opera singer. They were the people who run theatres. They were real hard workers who knew their job well. And this is where the parents of football player Timur Sigisbayev lived. He is our pride. When he came to his parents, all the boys gathered here. He'd go out and play football with them. It was a moment of absolute happiness for these guys. There were painted football gates here. While Timur scored goals, the boys considered it an honor to stand at the gate.
Probably not just the boys, but also the girls wanted to join the game, right?
Of course, Jamilya and I used to play football all the time. And these are our windows to the left of the entrance hallway.
So, that very house.
Yeah, that house.
Walking like this, in early autumn, through Almaty courtyards, it is easy to imagine the atmosphere that was here 30 or 40 years ago. Houses, garages, and shade trees, everything is in place. In fact, not much has changed here. Back in the day, when the young father was sledding his little daughter Jamilya from the ice hills near the opera house, she told him, "You know, Daddy, happiness is always unexpected." Today, another amazing conversation and a walk with a wonderful person to wonderful places was this unexpected happiness for me. And if you hadn't become an architect, if life had been different, who would you be?
Well, I didn't even think about it, although many people ask me, maybe a musician? That's because I graduated from music school. No, I wouldn't, because I'm a very average musician. And I definitely wouldn't want to be an average person playing in an orchestra or being a soloist. I would make a very bad one. I'd be a pain in the neck.
And what else? What other talents do you have?
Talent is a big word, so no. But I can do just a bit of drawing and painting. Just a bit.
В рисовании, небольшие способности живописи, совсем небольшие.
Almas Ordabayev has been active in the profession for over 60 years. He presented many significant and large-scale projects to different cities and their residents over these years, and we can only guess how many more great things he will do in the future. Well, now we have to say goodbye to the heroes of our program, but soon we will present to you our new heroes, new acquaintances and new success stories. I am Alevtina Madyarova. Until next time.